Podcast, The Rhythm. Go live, Vegas on the screen, feeling the flow, so pristine. Boom, as the beats align, electric dreams, they intertwine.
It's the Gameday Huddle. Your sports hang out, bringing you the scores, steady you shout.
All right, welcome on in, off and running on a Monday, a mid-July Monday at that. It is the Gameday Huddle. Brett Lawson, Steve Johnson, no Jimmy here, but at this point we're kind of used to it, but that's okay. He's a very busy man, and ultimately, as always, he will be with us here in spirit. But fear not, because we are so happy to be back in the Go Live Vegas studio, talking plenty of shop today. And yes, it may seem like the dog days of summer, but given the fact that we focus extensively on the hobby space in this show and everything regarding the trading card industry, Steve, that is not necessarily the case. And we weren't on last week. Of course, last Monday, you had the fun home run derby, more fun than it has been in recent years. The All-Star game, especially so. We saw the thrilling way that ended, a great format change to that, and everyone, pretty much the collective opinion surrounding it was positive, and the ratings certainly reflect that as well. But I mentioned baseball, Steve, because that's exactly where I want to begin today. Now that the All-Star break is officially in the rearview mirror, there is a lot to evaluate on the card front. So we'll break numerous aspects of that down here in the opening segment. But I just want to ask you right off the bat, what is the single most important thing, both someone in your position in the industry and, of course, the collector themselves? What is the most important thing regarding the sport of baseball this time of year and being aggressive in getting after those markets, some who may fall a little bit on the other side in the second half now that is now underway, or some who may rise now that the All-Star break is all set in stone?
Well, one of the things that I think is important is that you trend against the players that started to have an upswing before the All-Star break, right?
And a lot of the guys that you mentioned,
what that will do is it'll kind of indicate that player moving forward. Because what a lot of people miss sometimes is you'll open up the season, you got April, May, and then by about June, sometimes you go back and you're starting to rework on things that you're doing wrong, right? And I think of some of these guys that had very high strikeout counts, the Ellie De La Cruzes, right? Pete Alonso was swinging missing a lot, right? And these are guys that you start to see that what they do is they go and they work on things, and now they start to have a little bit different of an approach. I can tell you one, look, he was an all-star, and yes, it's a little fan-friendly thing. It's not like he's a new name, Manny Machado.
Yeah.
But Machado did not start out strong. He was not driving the ball. And you can tell that, they went and worked on some things, and now he's got power all over the field again. And, so you can start to look and watch for some of these trends.
Yeah.
Two, injuries. Look at major positions for teams and look at what they have down the pipeline. And you can start. It's almost like investing into a backup quarterback, right? And you can look and say, okay, hey, who's the next outfield up for this group that has a tendency to not always be healthy, right? So you can look at those things. Guys that trend, guys that can trend. We've got the trade deadline coming up.
Yep.
Those things are all important when it comes to the investment into sports cards and where a guy might land. And I'll give you a really good name, and I'm glad we started off to talk about this.
That's why I wanted to. I want to be as specific as possible.
The guy that no one's talking about right now, and understandably so, is Eugenio Suarez, right? He's got 35 home runs for the Diamondbacks. He's killing the baseball. He's playing good defense. I'm not going to say great, but he's playing good defense. Good enough that he's going to go and he can play third for almost any team he goes to play for. And he's a guy that kicked around in the Reds organization, started with the Tigers, and he's one of those guys that just kind of, look, he never really found a good fit. And I think part of the reason why he didn't find a good fit is he played on a lot of really tight teams. So I say this because I think this is very cautionary. You can buy his rookie autos for like $150 right now, which I think is underpriced for a guy that's having a season like this.
Yeah.
But the hobby is being, kind of hold off-ish because it's the Diamondbacks. They're not, they're on the outside looking in at the wild card. Right. They're definitely not in it in the division.
Yep.
Okay. So when you start looking at that, he's a guy that, though, his contract's up. So he is heavy trade bait for them to be able to get someone back that probably comes back and plays now and probably a good package of prospects because he's going to be looked at as a guy that, I think of some of these big bangers we've seen in the past. I remember Chris Davis, right? Chris Davis was a really good example of a guy that was he was banging home runs, had a really good season, and then what happens? All of a sudden, he gets traded at the trade deadline, goes to a team, and never really produces the same way. He had a couple big years, but not really to the point that he became like a superstar.
Right.
So a guy like Eugenio, what you really want to watch with him is where he lands. Because that's important. If he lands with the Yankees, I expect his production to go down. As crazy as that sounds, right? That
you have to look at the circumstances.
Yeah, because if he lands with a team like that, and it's a tight team, and they're always wired, and they're very structured, and all this stuff, might not be the best for him.
Right.
Texas wouldn't be a great spot for him. If he landed in Texas, because Texas is not a loose group. Texas is everybody on that team. They don't talk to the media.
Yeah.
They don't, he ends up with a team that kind of is off the radar. And as much as I hate to say this, if he ends up with a team like the Giants, right now, I'm not saying the Giants need help at third base, but the Giants will take any piece of power in the middle of their lineup. Right?
Especially given on the other side of the Devers acquisition, initially we thought it was going to look great. Hasn't been. Now, there's reasons for it, but hasn't been, if you look at the immediate results we may thought we'd get offensively at the plate, hasn't quite been up to snuff. And there's reasons for that, but it's noticeable.
No, and see, when you know that you can add a bat, and it's also you start looking at teams that need to add, some right-handed pop. And you've got some teams on the outside looking in. You got teams like, I don't know, the Royals, right? The Royals. He lands with a team like the Royals, probably still be successful, probably still grind, because that team kind of feels a little bit like the Diamondbacks. So sometimes you really want to watch where a guy lands. You want to watch what the situation is that he could be. And then the other thing I'm going to mention is that this year, this trade deadline is not good. There are not a lot of big names. There's arms out there.
Yeah.
And a lot of them are bullpen arms.
And that's ultimately what I kind of wanted to lead to next, because you mentioned now, and we'll get to the kind of how the casual fans will gauge everything they saw at the All-Star game and the Home Run Derby, since a lot of that is the popularity, the mainstream appeal. But what you mentioned is important. It's the circumstantial aspects. And the teams that are in specific circumstances are always the one who are either more aggressive or even not aggressive enough at times at the trade deadline. And I like what you said, because it just feels like the Yankees, right? Or some other team that's good and is going to be in the mix in the grand scheme of things when it's all said and done, but seems a little thin, right, in a particular area, or a little short in one department. Those teams are going to be aggressive. But it's much like what you said. A lot of what you could be going after, or really will be going after at the trade deadline, is more so depth. It's not like that Justin Verlander needle-moving move like the Astros did a few years ago. There's more recent examples, but that's a glaring example given how it happened. So do the Yankees do something, sexy or juicy or flashy? Sure, Jimmy and myself would like that to be the case. Maybe it's a little bit more just substance over flash. But ultimately, I do have to ask you, if there is a particular team who you think really needs to be tactical, maybe it is the Yankees, maybe it's someone who's a sleeper, maybe it's someone who no one really has on the radar to make a move, Steve, but you do think will make a move. Who do you think, when it comes to the trade deadline, we're going to be getting all the push notifications on our phones about?
This is an interesting year for this, where I think that some teams might be trying to make moves for 2 years out. So
down the road.
Like Johan Duran, for example, right? Look, the guy's a premier closer in the league. He pitches for Minnesota. He's been lights out the last 10, 12 outings.
Yeah.
That guy in particular is one of those players that he could go to a team that's like on the cusp, but really is looking forward to the following year.
Right. You're planting the seeds this year, but it's really more so for a year down the road.
And like teams that you're looking at like that, in my opinion, you're going to be looking at a team like the Reds. You'd be looking at teams like probably Atlanta at this point, right? Some of these teams that just it's going to be a real strong push to be able to get where they're at.
Yeah.
And especially when you have like for example, the Reds in their division, you just had Brewers rip off 12 straight games or something like that. Toronto's doing the same thing in the East.
Toronto temporarily was number 1 in the East just a few days ago. I'd have to look at the standings again because it'll fluctuate, but the fact that you had someone other than New York at one point is telling.
Yes, and so, you've got some of these that look, these teams are going to look at it. They're going to see what they can do. And when they're looking, when you can get a guy like Duran, for example, and a lot of people, when we're in the hobby side of this, a lot of times we don't look at what the contract is. We just look at what the guy's doing for us now. Right. But if you look at say Johan Duran, it's like, okay, he's under control for the year, but he's also got there's an option for one more year. So that type of a player, right, is someone that can get moved, will be moved, and is able to return a little bit to his team, but then also on the flip side have value to where he's going to land. So these are things that I think are very important to look at when you're looking down the road here. There's not a lot of big flashy names to be moved. If they are moved, if a big flashy name is moved, a Chris Sale as an example. If a Chris Sale gets moved because someone just goes, it's not because he's being marketed. It's because someone is identifying that he is someone they need in their rotation to do something now, and they're going to mortgage a future for it.
And that's what I like that you said. It's something specific. So often these guys are brought in to address one particular need. It's not like, oh, this is the move that's going to blow it over the top, and this is going to be necessarily the difference in us winning and losing the pennant or winning or losing the World Series. It's more about it's putting us in position to go a different route. Because if we cover, pun very much intended, if we cover our bases now, we may give ourselves a better position in terms of seeding. We may set ourselves up better in terms of the actual matchup itself. It's not necessarily, we know when it, like the Verlander aspect of it all, then it works big, right? It's easy to say, oh, that was the difference. And sometimes that's the case, but a lot of times it's more so how they're going to look leading up to that point. And that's more so what I think is going to be what we're going to be following, right? Because a lot of the casual fans, the bettors, they're going to get, if anyone makes a huge move, they're going to jump on the future boards, right? Social media is going to blow up. But it's going to be interesting how I think a lot of the card markets that are already doing well, if the teams that host those players or that those players belong to on those rosters, those are the teams that where I really look forward to seeing it, because if anything, if those teams are even better, it's only going to help what's already good, but it's not necessarily going to hurt what is already a weakness. You know what I mean? It's more like it's a bandage that could potentially wind up leading to pay dirt, depending on how good your team actually is.
Well, and you've got some teams that they've got themselves into some future trouble,
like a conundrum, right?
They've mortgaged a lot of their assets and, have moved a lot of things on. And real quick, just to point out, because you mentioned this, Toronto's up 3 games right now in the division.
And then
Toronto's up 3, Boston's back 5, Tampa Bay's now back 6.5.
And then to confirm what you said, Milwaukee has won 10 straight, and they are now officially tied with the Cubs.
Yeah, with the Cubs. Yeah. And then Detroit, look, they're leading baseball in wins by 2. So don't
change easy.
It's very easy to sit here, and for a while there, all we kept saying was, oh, this Detroit team. I think this Detroit team's learned that they have 2 pitchers, not 3.
Yeah.
Right? So, you start to see these things. There's someone probably going to be active.
Yeah.
They have a ton of assets down the line. Right? They've got stuff they can move. They've got players in their farm system. Look, they've been drafting at the top of the draft for 15 years.
And look at how many people and look at how much representation they had in the All-Star game, which kind of goes back to the point I was just mentioning. That's a good team that could potentially address a weakness, and then all of their strengths as a result are now that much stronger.
And there's teams. A lot of times teams don't move in division, but I'm gonna throw a name out there, and I'm gonna throw a couple landing spots for you. Adolis Garcia, right? When we mention him with Texas, he's one of those guys that, look, he's just an exciting player, right?
Well, remember,
fun to watch.
2 years ago, remember how big it was.
And he could be that again. He's not old. He's a guy that can play. He hustles. He's had injuries here and there, but not really been injury ridden. Right. So he's a guy that, like, right now, in my opinion, he's probably someone that you could go buy some nice autos on, some early stuff. And if he gets moved, and I believe that if is probably when, right? He's going to end up with a team that could be the Yankees, could be the Mets, could be the Cubs, could be the Mariners. Those are all teams he could land with, and all of those teams are going to be an upgrade to his collectability in the hobby space. Texas is just not necessarily a place that guys collect a lot of players.
Right.
Look, Corey Seager is as good as anybody.
He was a hero a couple of years ago.
He's still as good as anybody.
No doubt.
And he is not nearly on the radar to collectors that he once was.
Wow.
Right? So your location can change that for you, right? You can go to places that, look, Astros are a great team. Astros are a great team, right? They're up in their division again, 4 games, and they're a place that when players change locations, it does not affect their values because people do not like the Astros.
Still,
so because of it,
they're villains.
Right. So because of it, that's how it is. So you got to look at where these guys are going to go. You're going to look at what things are going to happen. And then I think, again, to answer that first question that you asked, is trending in the current market and looking forward is who's going to be able to make moves and what's going to happen. Right. There's some guys, look, there's guys that their market has really, really popped and is up there already. And there's some guys that you're still kind of waiting to see if like that next step's going to go. And a couple of the guys that you can watch for, one is Andy Pagis
for the Dodgers. Yeah.
He's a guy that, look, he has a chance to get moved. I'm going to be honest with you. He is a potential trade guy. But if he gets moved in a trade, it's going to be a big deal with somewhere that he's going to end up being a front guy for. So that could give him an opportunity to be of value. And if the Dodgers keep him, he has played well enough.
Very.
In fact, there's an argument that he's outplayed those best outfielders that they have.
Yeah.
Right? So
and he has some protection in that lineup.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So he's one of those guys that, like, you could see trend and you could see him kind of take off and make some noise.
Okay.
Right?
Wow. Cool.
He's one of those guys. You've really got to start looking at this Brewers roster.
Yeah.
And I actually think now...
And not to interrupt you, they currently have a mark of 59-40. There's various metrics of the power rankings, but the one I'm looking at right now, they were previously at 3. They've already bumped up to 1. And, of course, this is fresh off of the sweep of the Dodgers.
And, look, they absolutely have pieces to move.
Right.
They absolutely have assets, and they've got pieces in place to keep them very relevant for a while. A lot of their guys are under contract. This has been done very, very well by them. I have to say that, right? So when you're looking at them, what could they be looking for?
Right.
Well, they could use another outfielder. Everybody could use frontline pitching, right? And could they be a guy that could use a third baseman? Right? So this could be one of those situations where you could see a couple of big piece assets. Now, I'm not saying they're going to move their big piece, right? But they've got some big piece assets that they could move that really
100%.
Could make a difference. And I think it's about time, though, that you really, really start looking at that core of the Brewers, right? When you start looking at the
nucleus,
Brewers, you start looking at that team. There are players on that team. And one of them's a recent guy that's kind of fallen off, right? You got him and his brother both in the big leagues now. And that Brewers team is starting to put it together. So, again, you look for momentum with players, with teams.
Yep.
That's going to become interesting because all of a sudden, if one of these guys goes and runs off a 8-10 games with 5 home runs, hits 400 during the stretch, drives in 15 runs, then all of a sudden you're going to be sitting there and you're going to be looking down and you're going to be going, you know what? I got to pay attention to this. I got to look at this. I got to pay attention to this guy. And it's because of what's happening there. And look, there's a lot of guys on this roster that aren't on everyone's
radar.
Like, they're not.
Yeah.
Right?
To the point where it's almost, in addition to the hobby space, you have to wonder who's just going to get away with just the absolute heist? Like, what fan, what bettor is going to find someone on a team they back or a team they support, root for, with a game-changing type of acquisition? Even if it doesn't end in the commissioner's trophy, if someone is in the conversation on the other side of that deadline,
right,
that is the move, that is the intention that they had when going to make that move.
I mean, it's funny because, you think of guys like, and a guy that stands out off that roster for me, right? And just to reference, I was talking about the Churio brothers because I got told that I didn't mention it. The Churio brothers, right? And obviously Churio's a guy that can really take a benefit here, right? And obviously, look, Christian Yelich, I think when it's all said and done, I think we know he's probably going to be a Hall of Famer at this point.
Yep.
I think he's on his way.
Yep.
He's definitely one of those guys. I don't think he's borderline. I think he's one of those guys.
Sure thing.
Yeah. Andrew Vaughn, though, right, came from the White Sox. They moved him to second base. He's been playing there. He's hitting well. He's a guy that also plays first, right? So he can do a little bit of everything.
Right.
He is one of those guys that he could potentially be somebody that could run off a stretch of 8 home runs in 10 games. And all of a sudden, in 1 month, you could see him trend huge. Mm-hmm. And he's on a team that's off the radar right now. But now we're going to start paying attention to the top teams in divisions and in the wild cards. So now your division and your roster gets opened up and we pay a lot more attention to stuff like that. And Andrew Vaughn is still not so far amiss because I should have mentioned this with Eugenio Suarez. His rookie stuff is in 2014. That's why you haven't seen a bullish move on him because he's older.
He's a vet.
Right.
Yeah.
He's older.
Yeah.
So therefore, you're not seeing the bullish moves on him. But a guy like Andrew Vaughn's still right in that time where he could be priming. We've seen the resurgence of Gavin Sheets in San Diego.
Right.
Right, with what he's doing for the Padres compared to what was happening with him. And don't get me wrong, he was a very nice player for the White Sox, but he was definitely not the player that he is in San Diego. Mm-hmm. So you start looking at some of those guys that could trend, that have potential to move up and look. But your big names that have been off the radar for a while that can start to move up, those are the ones you really want to take a look at.
And I love that you said it because so often in the world of sports, even though at the professional level, talent really is everything, so often it is about, in terms of competition and contending for a championship, it is about bringing in, Steve, the right players, not necessarily always the best players. Sometimes, they could coincide.
100%.
But a lot of times it's about getting the right guy. And again, if you see some of those comments popping up on your screen, you can join in on the conversation as well. Just like, follow, subscribe, any of our digital or social media platforms. Anthony Scott, hello, how are you, sir? Good morning. Hope all is well on your front. And Michael Lugo says he may have to stop by game day to pick himself up a PCA. Obviously, Cubbies fans are, on cloud 9 right now. But that's what makes it so interesting with everything that's happening with Milwaukee. And I want to ask you this because I have one more question before we go to break. But I guess now this is 2 questions because I do want to kind of focus on the NL Central. Did we in any way, shape, or form, when you, myself, and Jimmy were kind of doing our way too early divisional predictions, did you think you would see, regardless of who actually wins it when the dust settles, did you think you would see this much intrigue in the NL Central?
I didn't think that the Brewers were going to be as good as they are.
Right.
Like that really, and honestly, like I was a little more bullish on the Reds.
Mm-hmm. No, you were.
So
you were actually very bullish on the Reds. You thought the Reds were going to be one of those teams in the National League that could kind of sneak up to bite you.
That's a team that they still score runs and they just unfortunately give up more. Like,
But the other team is more productive.
Yeah, and so, unfortunately that's the case. And look, that division is very much like that. There's not, and when it comes to playoffs, that won't be very good. There's not a shutdown rotation in that division. Each team, though, has a nice arm or two, right? And so that's the thing. The Brewers are in a spot. Look, they've got, I guess we'll call them the most electric. I don't know. There's Skeens, there's Mizrachi. Like, you could go. His call-up, obviously, was like them getting something at the trade deadline, right? And being able to bring him in and do what he's doing, there's moves like that. Obviously, those things can get made. But that division, there was no way that I would have thought that anybody would have been close really to the Cubs.
Yeah, especially with at one point, even a couple of weeks ago, the way that Cubbies offense was looking, I mean, they still are an absolute juggernaut. We know how talented they are on paper. They have all-star representation, and it's just a public team regarding the market space. Like, I'm completely with you. And I think that's what makes this so fun, because obviously my question there was predicated towards the NL Central. There are a lot of divisions, I think, in the next couple of weeks, myself, you, and Jimmy are going to be able to have that exact conversation about, because things are starting to get volatile. And like you said, the trade deadline is going to be really interesting, because it doesn't have a whole lot of flash to it this year, where some years, that's the case. This year, not so much, but it feels like it's one of those years where it's going to be more of, I guess you could say, quality. And I know it's, in a way, it's always about quality over quantity, but when I say quality over quantity, I more so mean, maybe not quantity from a numerical standpoint, but in terms of, it's more about how you can address your roster rather than getting an immense amount of return on one player. I think that's the best way to phrase it. Now, in the hobby space, you want to see that return, but naturally, if that player's on a winning team, if that player's in a public market, that may swing it anyway, which leads me to my next question here, and we'll go to break after this. But we mentioned the home run derby. We mentioned the All-Star game. The ending was great. We talked about, Steve, when we were at the Las Vegas Super Convention doing live shows down there, how it seems like this is going to be a year where baseball really finds itself, or at least reveals itself to the masses in terms of where it really sits right now. It has done just that. We even predicted that it could really sit firmly as the number 2 most popular sport in the country. Now, years down the road, I don't know if that'll continue to be the case. Right now it is. The demographics between the young people, the target demos, that 18 to 34 demo, all shifting towards baseball. The All-Star game did 7.2. Obviously, it's always been the most watched All-Star game, so I get, in a way, you take that with a grain of salt. But the fact that the numbers were so stark, and the fact that there was so much interest and so much positive reception regarding the way this ended, all these things are good signs. And you have someone like Kyle Schwarber, who played with the Cubs, won a World Series with them, has been a stud ever since. Now it's with the Phillies, another major market and a contender, and we saw him win that whole thing in dramatic fashion. Do instances like that, or do instances like even someone for like a Luke Carroll, who played tremendously in the game leading up to that point for the National League, right? Are there instances where the popularity trends of the game of baseball and the fact that the stage on Monday and Tuesday night were so prominent, do we see immediate, if not short and brief, I guess you could say, reaction in the hobby space? Are the Schwarbers of the world selling a lot, at least in the 5 days or week after that game?
So I don't know that Schwarber are going to see much of an uptick from something like that.
Right.
But the guys that you're going to see an uptick from are going to be the guys that now Major League Baseball has had time with to create marketing behind.
There you go.
Right? So you're going to see Mizrahi's face all over baseball. Pete Crow Armstrong,
especially with
going to be all over baseball.
And he earned a lot of fans
right?
when he was mic'd up doing the interviews with the broadcast team. Like, a lot of people on social media are like, I don't know much about this kid, but I like him.
That guy is great.
Yeah.
So some of these young players that now Major League Baseball was able to shoot promo footage with, that they're now going to be able to push out, and you're going to get your Sunday Night Baseball promos, and you're going to have them talking and interviews with them, because that's what the All-Star festivities are all about, gaining media and marketing exposure.
Always.
So that's a big part of it. So you're going to see that with some of these guys, some of the guys that maybe haven't been on a radar that are going to end up on a radar. You got the Kuntz, playing on a team that's not very good, but you got to see how fun he can be and how entertaining he can be. And if you watched any of the outside of the regular broadcast coverage, the batting practices and stuff like that, and seeing him running around and being loose and playing and having fun, like, those are things that will grab fan attention. So those are important. Real quick, because I just want to mention this before we do go to a break. There's outfielders on the market. Right? So outfielders on the market.
Can we get a name
so
or
it's
two?
really looking to see what outfielders are really going to be able to get moved and work. Stephen Kwan, right? He's one.
And he played great on Tuesday night as well. And we know how good he is, almost to the point where, it's not – he plays for a contender, and a team that was competing for a pennant against the Yankees last year is still really good, and yet just kind of seems –
Kwan is almost an upgrade to almost any roster.
No doubt.
Right? He does it all.
Like, he's one of those guys where nothing's a guarantee, but you're almost good if you bet watch or bet any Cleveland game. Stephen Kwan is going to do something that's going to put the Guardians in position to win it.
Yeah, and he definitely will have a chance. So Jaron Duran is the other one that is interesting. And this really becomes, are the Red Sox going to become a seller, or are they going to try to buy themselves into the potentially a wild card. I think being 5.5 out in the division right now with 2 to leap is probably going to, put them a little bit more of a seller.
Right.
And we'll see. Another name that I think is really, really big on this, as dumb as this is that the Guardians have Clase, their closer, is also someone that's on there. Now, the difference between Duran and Clase is a converted starter. He's a guy that can give you multiple innings if you need.
Yeah.
And if you're a playoff position team, the Dodgers, the Yankees, the Mets, the Cubs, the Brewers, the
He's gotta be
Padres,
right there.
if you're one of those teams, this is a guy that could come in on the back end of your bullpen and he could supersede your closer.
Right.
And then could end up doing 2 inning saves from time to time because you still retain your closer to be able to be his backup.
2
basically,
birds in one
right?
stone, kind of. Yeah.
Reminds me a lot, like he's the type player, because Norm Charlton with the Reds was like this. Remember? Mm-hmm. Charlton was one of those guys that could go multiple innings, and then they had Dibble, and then they would kind of bounce back and
throw him
forth.
back out.
But Dibble would be a 1-inning guy.
Yeah.
Charlton could get you 2 if you needed. Mm-hmm. Now all of a sudden that's a third of a game. So when you start looking at these, potential, situations and placements and whatever it might be, these are all guys that could do, make some noise. And then with the Diamondbacks, the other name that I think is very important is Gallen, right? Zach Gallen's a Cy Young winner. Yeah. He's a guy that is probably the number 2 on any team he goes to immediately, and number 1's on half the teams in the league.
Yes.
So he's a guy you're going to have to give up a big package for. It's going to be a team that if it makes a move, it's going to be a team that's probably going to be a little less on the radar but has more assets. This is going to be a team, in my opinion, of Tampa or someone like that would go out and be able to make a move for him. The Mariners are probably the biggest name team that I could think of that might have the ability just because they have some assets in their farm system. Right. Look, I think Ford is probably not going to catch for them anytime soon, so he's probably a guy that if you need catching help, Guardians, you might be able to pick up a catcher and then package it together. So you've got a few of those things that I think you should pay attention to. There's a lot of storylines here, but your biggest thing is do not get caught up in the hype of a week.
Right.
Because that will kill you in the hobby.
And that's why I think it's interesting with Cal Raleigh. Yeah, he has a lot of new fans because of everything in the home run derby. We got to see him hit both sides of the plate, right? The fact you have a switch slugger like that is really cool. We know what Judge is, not forget about his an all-time great season. Judge is on an all-time great run, on his way to maybe becoming the most prolific batter the game has ever seen, and he's not even leading the league in home runs, and it's pretty cool knowing that that is the case, that there's a slugger that is even past that generational great. And we know the story with him, and his dad as a kid. His dad is there, his brother's there, the whole family's out there pitching to him and catching for him. It's a great story. It's like a full circle type of moment since he, manifested that as a young child. But what's interesting is that he's not an example of just a week, because you have been talking about him on this very show all season long. His card market has surged all season long as a result, and it probably will still continue to do that. But it's not just because he won the home run derby. It's more rather he's having a great year. The home run derby is just another example of that.
Well, and you're going to see where I think this will really make a difference is if we get down and we're getting into September, right? And we start coming out of August into September, and we're talking about Cal Riley is ahead of Judge in the MVP talks. Because
I get ready for
when
it.
that happens, you're going to start seeing the casual person is going to be like, I guess I better buy one now.
And that's what makes it so interesting, the fact that he is not in the National League. Because we came into the season talking so much about Soto and Ohtani and Judge, 3 of them, but 2 of them are out of Judge's league, right? So he doesn't have to essentially deal with them. And when I say league, I mean literally, not in terms of tier of player. But that's what makes it so interesting, because now here comes a guy who bursts on the scene who's good, but is now all the talk of the town, and he's right smack dab there in the American League along with Judge. So something's got to give here, and it's kind of exciting.
If you're the Mariners and if you're watching, make the big move. Make the big move you need. Go out and get a Suarez. Yeah, sure, he's a stopgap for a year. You got him, you plug him in for a year, that's fine. If you can grab a Steven Kwan, I would grab him. And the reason being is because these guys are going to help you and your team perform better, right? Julio Rodriguez is playing at a much different level the last 6 weeks than he was playing at the beginning of the season.
And health is still a factor there. When he really settles in and gets ready to go, just wait.
Yeah,
and then,
so,
of course, a Rosarena, like you go on and on with how talented the team is.
Exactly. Yeah. So when you start looking at these teams and what they can do, and look, the Mariners are probably the one team that I can sit here and say, look, they're 3 deep at starters and arguably could be a 4th, right? So any type of major upgrade that they could do, something that they could, put on the radar that would really make sense, I think that they should do. They should definitely be active. My Padres should absolutely be active. And my Padres, unfortunately, we need someone else in the infield.
Yeah.
As much as I hate to say that, because it seems like we're set, we definitely need someone else in the infield, even if it's just somebody that we're bringing in that's spelling, a Bogarts here and there, or, giving Cronenworth some time off against lefties or whatever it might be. But more importantly, we need help in the middle of the bullpen. And so we're going to be out looking for that. Look at these situations with teams. Look at what they could, potentially land, what they have, what they could use in their situation.
And
the Giants are another team that, they could probably use 2 outfielders, not one.
And the conversation changes based off the division. The Giants, the only reason why they're under a spotlight, or even the San Diego Padres, is because of the landscape that they have to compete in. If you're in a weaker division in the National League or the American League, respectively, you don't have that type of pressure. But even if you're a good team who's going to be right there when it's all said and done in the playoff hunt, in the pennant race, that still may not be enough given the contemporaries that surround you in your particular league. So that's what's so crucial about making a move, and that's what Steve was alluding to, and even what I kind of teed him up for. It's not so much about the flash. It's not so much about the star power. It's about bringing in the right guy who will immediately address all issues and cover up any weaknesses that could be an Achilles heel moving into the playoffs. And it's very much what we do regarding the NFL, not so much the trade deadline, but everything in the offseason. Trade deadline is big in the NFL, but it's always going to be the icing and not the cake, where the cake ultimately is the spring period where you get the free agency and the draft. And when we were doing this show just a couple of months discussing that, Steve, it's a much different conversation, both in the day-to-day news cycle and in the hobby space, than the conversation we're going to have now. Yes, it may still be the off-season, but now we're getting close to the preseason, and now with everything in mini camps and training camp around the corner, it is smack dab in front of our noses, and we have to get ready to calibrate and set the focus as the fall is fast approaching. So we're going to take a quick break, and on the other side, Steve is going to shine some light on exactly how to do that. He's going to tell you who he thinks is really going to boom, who's going to really drop here in the next couple of weeks, whose market could surge because of certain circumstantial happenings within their given organization, and everything in between. Plus, we also got some news on the NBA front regarding Chris Paul going back to Los Angeles Clippers. So don't go anywhere. We still have plenty more to get to right here from the Go Live Vegas studio. It's the Game Day Huddle on a Monday. Brett Lawson, Steve Johnson, Jimmy out, but don't worry, still plenty more to come. Stick around.
Peppermint Patty's the worst. Comic-Con.com, your daily comic convention online. Insightful reviews, previews of the comics, toys, and games you need to know. Delightful chats with luminaries from around the geek spectrum. In print, on video, and everywhere in between. The show never stops on Comic-Con.com.
Come on down to the good old bar. Craft beer is never too far. I do every night. Do a crew and get it right. Raise the glass, raise the deal hat. The food, friends early. Dance around, let them play. Voodoo boys will play Tuesday.
Swim, you will find. Studios, a unique multi-camera social media virtual content creators paradise. We offer high-end services using live streaming and film production for your personal or corporate, commercial or event and campaign needs. Pre-record or live stream to your audience on multiple social media platforms simultaneously. Fun and interactive with social media comments, phone lines, live remotes, audio Foley sounds, and Snapchat filters. Be creative, get recognized, and make money. We help you by providing an all in-house production team. Visit our website at golive.vegas.
All right, keeping the fun rolling here on a Monday morning from the Go Live Vegas studio. It is the Game Day Huddle. Brett Lawson, Steve Johnson, Jimmy is out. We hope everything is going smooth and well for him. Busy time this time of year for you guys, right? I mean, I'm pretty sure eventually you're going to be back in the travel flow soon enough, right? Because, I mean, with you guys, it's the kind of thing where you could have something on your radar for months in advance, but also it could be something that kind of comes up last minute, or it could even be something that I've known working with you that you know it's coming, but you don't know for sure if you could be able to get there, but then something loose, opens up with your schedule, things get a little looser, and then you're able to go. Before we get into everything regarding the NFL, what is that like for you guys in your and Jimmy's position, knowing that obviously on the day-by-day, most of what you do is going to matter here locally in the Vegas Valley with Game Day Sports Cards, with One of Us Comics, but in terms of going remote, what is that like? In terms of anyone out there who may actually not just collecting in the hobby space, but who may actually want to get into what you and Jimmy are doing, what should they be prepared for regarding that?
Well, when you're preparing for shows, it's always a process, right? Because you're preparing inventory for the next show. You're also at the same time operating your day-to-day business, right?
Bingo.
And it's a challenge on whether a certain product is getting put out at the store. Are you holding on to certain product to go to a show? How are you doing that? With Game Day, Jimmy has a tendency, he puts a lot of stuff out. He will pull cards out of the store, take them for the weekend, come back, reload the store. They're at a point, though, they have so many singles now. It is crazy how many graded singles they have.
Right.
And so they're pretty set on being able to really operate, both of them and keep them going. For me, the challenges for me have really been, it seems like I'm going to be everywhere, but I honestly just choose where I want to go. Right. And a couple of the big shows, like a lot of times everybody's all excited about the big shows. And look, we've been talking on Who the F*** is Frank about San Diego Comic-Con and it coming up, and it's this week, right?
Yeah. Wow, already here.
I will be in San Diego this week. I will probably attend an exterior event. I'm not going to Comic-Con though.
And is that because I sometimes will join you on Who the F is Frank when you guys record that, and obviously so much of the focus on this week's episode will be that. But one thing I actually haven't asked you is, I know you're familiar with Comic-Con and a lot of your colleagues work directly in proximity to it. How many times, was there a streak where you were going every year? I'm just
I've
curious.
never really populated going to Comic-Con on a regular basis.
Okay, gotcha.
To me, it's really a fan event, and there was a period of time where the exclusives were such a big deal that you had to go or had people to go to acquire all the exclusives to be able to sell those on the secondary market. The exclusives have lost the luster they once had. They're just not the same. There's just not as much interest. There's so much where they're repurposing the same thing that's going to come out. Right? And this is good for the companies, but it's not good for the market.
Okay.
Right? So because of that, that's definitely become one of those things. So for me, Comic-Con is just more of a fan-friendly thing.
Yeah.
And
Almost
I'm
leisure.
more willing to go to the fan events. Also coming up, the National Sports Card Collector Convention, right? That's something that a lot of people will be at. I think Jimmy will be going. I know Game Day will have representation there.
Cool.
To what level, I'm not sure. However, myself, this is where you talk about things falling off, right? There was discussions on me going. There was a discussion on how that was going to happen. There was discussions on, how exactly I would be involved. Started talking to one company, ended up being another company, ended up being another company, and no one actually would pull the trigger.
Right.
And the thing
Game
is,
of telephone.
I'm not going to be a fan. I would only be going to be with a brand or in an attendance for my brand. And in this case, there's no reason for it. And Brendan's 100% right.
He knows as well as anybody. I mean, Brendan is the source expert on all of this, but he says San Diego Comic-Con on the floor is the worst. And that's a sentiment he has expressed on the show that he co-hosts with you, Who the F is Frank. And I'm sure you guys will tap more into that this week.
I shot a video walking the floor from one end to the other at Comic-Con one time. It was 45 minutes to go from one side of the floor to the other down one aisle, and I didn't stop. And it wasn't that it took that long to walk. It only takes you about 15 minutes to walk from one end to the other when it's wide open.
Right.
But because there's so many people in the building and things are so tight and everything's on top of each other.
The logistics.
It is so hard to navigate. The lines are, the lines are not fun. Getting into panels, if you haven't bought the big packages, good luck. Right? All of those things that are part of the fan experience, like when your fan experience becomes so hard to do and so hard to attend, and the National has done a better job of this, but even at the National, and Chicago's a better location than the other locations that they've used.
Right.
But the Chicago location, which is where it is this year, is still one of those logistically that can be tough. Loading in, getting into the show can take a while, right? And there's things that kind of like hamper you a little bit. And then as far as navigating the length of the show,
right,
if you're on one side and you have to go the other, you either go through the venue in kind of like a big U, or you cut across and then you've got to fight through those entering crowds into the beginning.
Traffic.
So you it's a pick or choose spot, and interesting. But look, this is the National runs at this time of year.
Right.
Football is king. Football cards will be being slung at the National. In fact, I would argue that probably 70% of the cards that move at the National will be football and Pokemon.
And that's what's so cool because, and boys, the Pokemon craze real. There's one thing I've learned about hosting the show along with you and Jimmy. It's how we could just really recalibrate this and refocus it into a Pokemon show. And who knows, we may even take off even bigger. But of course, the market, the appeal for sports will always be there. And whether it be, more of a pop culture oriented fan convention or something related to the hobby space in the trading card industry, it's getting big when logistically you have to kind of create your own strategic shortcuts and plans to deal with it all, much like you do when you're going to Disneyland, much like you do when you're going to your favorite ballpark or a major event. When you kind of learn how to navigate through it all, you kind of learn these little cheat codes and secrets and shortcuts, which makes it interesting, but it also goes to show just how big it has gotten. And that was what was cool just a couple of weeks ago when we had Anthony Scott joining us, when Jimmy was also here, talking about Fanatics and everything there. Obviously, with where Anthony is down on the ground, major market there, and he's a very busy man in the exact location you were just describing. And of course, Anthony joining us now in the comments along with Richard Delatorre, Michael Lugo. If anyone else would like to join in and, just chime in, get in on the fun, on the conversation, you have a take, you have a question, you have a thought, throw it in the comments. The phone lines will be open. We want to make this as interactive as possible the rest of the way. Again, we appreciate your support. Find us on any of your social media or digital platforms. And again, jump in on the conversation the rest of the way. But Steve, as you just said, football is king. It is always king. It's going to be king in those scenarios, but it's going to be king on the day-to-day, whether you're in a major market, a mid-market, or a small market. So this time of year can get a little tricky because we now have so much of the offseason behind us to where we know what these teams, at least on paper, are really going to look like. We were talking before we came on air here in the studio about what some of these quarterback rooms are going to look like, how some of these depth charts are going to be refined on the other side of training camp. But even though we're close, we're not quite there yet because we right now are in that kind of mini camp OTA period. As Anthony Scott says, comfortable shoes and good insoles. Another great bit of advice, right? If you're going to be in the mix of all this and you're going to be neck deep, be comfortable. And that's why right there,
exactly,
he is an expert. And that's why shows like this exist to help you guys out if you are a novice. But again, when looking at the NFL right now, Steve, we know in terms of the teams that drafted certain guys that needed to fill a role, a primary role right away, we're going to see those guys have a regular contribution the rookie year to the point where they may be a game-changing player. We won't know until a couple of months, right? But in terms of right now, whether it be a year one guy who's about to be a rookie, whether it be a guy who just moved, whether it be a year two guy like a Bo Nix or a Jaden Daniels, who we've talked about ad nauseum on this show, what is the most important thing in evaluating player markets right now when we're not quite at the preseason, but we know that football is directly on the horizon, and now it's time to get ready for that?
Well, the first thing is that you have to determine that if you're still in the buying market on the higher end guys. Okay. Now, what happens leading into seasons are really two things in the NFL. It's the rookie quarterbacks coming in and some of the sophomore or junior quarterbacks.
CJ Stroud.
And
even.
what they're going to be doing this year and how that'll affect their hobby. Now, CJ Stroud, I'm glad you mentioned him. He had a big upswing, right? He was super big in that 23 class, right? He was a big deal for the 23 class. Then now all of a sudden he comes back to earth a little bit last year. And now coming into this 25 season, is he going to have that resurgence? We saw a little bit of it at the end of the season. Are we going to see that? I personally think CJ Stroud, good investment. I think he's one of the ones. But I think when you're talking about what potential upswing he could have, 10 or 15%, don't think you're going to have a massive, massive gain with him.
It's marginal.
You got to find guys. You got to do one of two things here. You either need to identify guys in which situations are probably going to help them kind of step things up, or you need to find situations where someone could be coming in and looking at a huge potential big upside.
Right.
But if you do that, you're generally going all in. So first off, you mentioned training camps, and just to mention, Chargers went to training camp on the 16th, the 19th, the Lions, and then today the Chiefs and the Cowboys go to training camp. Tomorrow, everybody's in camp.
And that's what's so cool, because we say it all the time. It's almost a running gag. We wish we were a daily show, because we sit here now, and I kind of framed it like that, because by the time we're here, and hopefully Jimmy will be back with us next week in the show, in the studio, then we'll be neck deep. And then by that point, who knows what the markets will be telling us.
Well, because
with as active as it is, in 3-5 days at all the various game day locations, let alone across the country, we could see a swing.
You're going to hear
People are gonna
guys
get
getting reps, things like that really start to matter, where people are like, wait, this guy's getting a lot of reps? Like,
what does this mean?
What does that mean?
Yeah.
And then who's not participating or has limited participation because they're already locked in? Sometimes that scenario or situation occurs. You know, you think of the McCaffreys and guys like that just, they generally don't touch the ball the first, 3 weeks of training camp as far as anything that might be hitting or whatever it is.
Any kind of contact.
You still got a couple of guys that are moving. You got a couple of guys that are sitting on the beach waiting to get signed.
Yep.
One of the guys that just got moved, Noah Fant, was just released
last night,
which is crazy to me, because he didn't have a big season last year, but he did have 500 yards. 500 yards from a tight end is very strong. And he goes in and almost helps any tight end situation. And there's a lot of big name teams that probably are calling his agent today and seeing if they can get him on their roster.
And if there's one thing, even outside the card market, you can just be a fantasy football player, just an avid fantasy football player who knows this. Tight end may have a bigger drop-off from the top 2 or 3 to the middle of the pack than any position in football.
Correct.
So just because you are getting a guy who could essentially be ranked, the 6th, 7th tight end in the league, he's going to be a lot lower on the totem pole than the 6th, 7th ranked receiver is going to be. So just because you get a guy who isn't a Brock Bowers, right, or who isn't, a prime Mark Andrews or any of these guys, obviously Kelsey and Kittle are kind of at a point in their career where they're more so just seeing how they're going to ride things out. But even then, you have a veteran tight end who's an established name. They may get a little more pop than someone like a Noah Fant, because tight ends are just one of those volatile positions to where you can be really, really good, but not necessarily the most productive or flashiest guy.
But how good could he be if he ended up with a team like the 49ers? Right?
Who need all the offensive help they can get.
And they could use it.
You'll be a focal point.
They could use another tight end, right? So when you start looking at these situations, again, we talked about this with baseball. We talked about it in football. Now, what you're going to really pay attention to, though, for this offseason is people want to see how these rookie quarterbacks are developing to make their determination on who they're going to invest into. However, I think that gets overlooked a lot. And what I mean by that is, it's so easy to go and sit there and say, oh, Jackson Dart was drafted this high. Let's go ahead and look, we think that probably by Thanksgiving he could be seeing reps, like whatever it is, right? We could talk about those guys. Those are easy. Those are the speculations. Those are the guys we talk about.
Especially as a year one quarter. Like, it's pretty much, and Thanksgiving's almost like the loose line in the sand threshold type of parameter of time. Sometimes it's a little earlier, like with Baker and who was it? Tyrod Taylor, Justin Herbert and Tyrod Taylor. Obviously, that was for medical reasons. That was almost negligence, even malpractice. But sometimes we see a guy thrown out there early, and a lot of times, especially in a year where someone like Brian Daboll's coaching to save his job, that may be expedited even quicker. But again, you're going to know that, right? The second the Giants drafted Jackson Dart, every Giant fan knew that was going to be the case.
So when you're looking at these situations, you look at this stuff, and I see Michael Lugo's asking how we feel about Howard behind Aaron and asking if he gets his chance to shine. Probably not this year. Right. I'm just going to be honest with you. I don't see, barring injury, he'll take every snap for the Steelers. Right? Just going to. Yeah. And at the same time, I think that you're going to look at that team, and that team's got a couple of pieces they made moves on.
And I'm completely with you. There's an intention here. The Steelers wouldn't have wasted their time with Rodgers dragging his feet had they not been intent on him being their guy. Again, it's Aaron Rodgers. You're going to get a lot of baggage. You're going to get a lot of media circulation around it. But if he plays well, and again, that's a pretty low bar given where we are right now, I'm with you. Will Howard just isn't big enough of a priority right now to supersede what Rodgers is doing.
If things go well for him, he will sit behind Aaron Rodgers for 2 years. And then Aaron Rodgers will retire, and he will take over there, and then that will be it. In a perfect scenario, in my opinion, for him, right? Whereas you got other guys that are in different spots and in different situations. You could talk about some of these guys that were drafted, some of these quarterbacks that went. Was it a great quarterback draft class? We know that. That drives the hobby space a lot of times. There's going to be a lot of speculation. Where we're going to be looking is that, you mentioned it, everyone's going to be looking, well, what Bo Nix are we getting? What Jaden Daniels are we getting? Everybody's got their eyes on that. A lot of people are going, Drake May, right? They're talking about him.
Maybe Michael Penix Jr.
Well, that's who I wanted to talk about.
Okay.
Because Michael Penix Jr. is a really good example where a team was, and it was put to me from Anthony Scott today. He actually texted me, and he said this. He said that the Falcons were a quarterback away from winning their division last year, and had they gotten even a semblance of the good Kirk Cousins, they probably would have won that division. And outside of the Buccaneers, look,
it's a weak division.
New Orleans isn't scaring me.
Not at all.
Right?
New Orleans has gotten worse.
Right.
Yeah.
So those teams that were at the top, I'm not as sold on the Buccaneers as a lot of other people are.
Right.
That Buccaneers team got really half their year in a cakewalk. So I'm not stuck on that. However, that Falcons team has the potential to be very good.
Yeah. A lot of talent.
And Michael Penix Jr. now had a chance to get healthy, has had a chance to take reps with the guys, has had off seasons with his guys, has had all of that stuff. I think he is such a sneaky investment.
Yeah.
And his market is so down right now in comparison to those other guys. And I'll tell you, I promise you right now, if I put Penix healthy and Drake May in the same room together,
better situation.
And I asked every single lead executive in the NFL to pick which player they would take to build they have to take one of those two. I would bet you that 90% of them are taking Michael Penix Jr.
And that's what's so funny. There was a really large overreaction on Penix Jr. just because of the situation the Falcons were in and what he inherited. He's a rookie quarterback who basically was just handed the offense because Kirk Cousins was just absolutely inept.
Yeah.
I mean, forget about bad. He was forget about non-existent. He was actually hurting the team. So anything that deviated from that would be an improvement. The thing about Penix is that he has a very modern day skill set. Drake May certainly does as well, but Drake May is also in an organization who has not addressed the offensive side of the football since Tom Brady was there, and he's the best player in the history of the organization, the most accomplished player in the history of the league. So I just don't know what Drake May is really going to be getting. I think they're going to be a lot better in terms of coaching, obviously, and I think we're going to slowly see New England kind of find a nucleus of talent, but Atlanta already has their nucleus of talent.
That team is
Atlanta already has their guys.
That Patriots team is going to be much better than they were, but they're not going to be good enough.
Long way to go.
And there's still an argument that the Dolphins are still the second best team in that division.
And I completely agree with you.
Right?
I still think they are. And Atlanta, when you look at it, I get it, Tampa Bay has won the last 2 years because of Baker, but that's because he hasn't really had a lot of opposition for any team to consistently have a quarterback. If Atlanta has a quarterback presence, even if Penix has his ups and downs, but he's productive and there's a noticeable change in how that offense flows, especially with the deep ball, because that's his strength, and they have speedy guys on the outside. Now we're going to be having a much different conversation because Tampa is going to be challenged a little bit.
Now, I will tell you this. If you're investing in a Michael Penix Jr. right now, and you are buying him, and I do suggest that you do, you should also buy Drake London. And the reason being is because they're going to go hand in hand.
No doubt.
So Drake London's market will improve with a performance from Michael Penix.
And I think Bijan Robinson, that's a situation where the running back doesn't hurt the quarterback because Bijan is going to make Penix that much better off of play action, off of the run pass element.
Well, and he can catch the ball.
And the fact that's the main part. He's good for 50. I don't know if he will get that. He's good for 50, 60 catches a year.
Right.
He's that type of athlete, and he's really improved at his pass blocking. So there's a lot of things trending upward for Atlanta right now. Still on the fence regarding everything in terms of the head coach. We're going to find out a lot about a lot about that this year, as well as the defense. But it's like you said, teams don't have the same amount of film on Penix that they use some of these other guys. And Penix kind of last year just went out there and threw it to the wall, and they wanted to see what could stick. Now I think we're going to see a much more refined approach and a quarterback in year 2 where maybe he isn't the guy, but we're going to know really quick. And personally, I think he's going to be the guy.
Well, and I think he'll do well, and I think he is. Now, another really good investment right now, and I know that over the last 3 months, there has been an uptick, but the uptick in his market has been so minimal compared to what you would expect other quarterbacks to be.
So then let's shift to that now. Perfect. And it's obvious, there's year 2 guys, but we also have another year 3 guy in addition to C.J. Stroud and Bryce Young, who we saw play really well down the stretch last year. But up to that point, we were wondering if he would even be in the league by the time the 2025 season rolls around. So is there a particular quarterback, and it doesn't necessarily have to be Bryce, could it be anybody? Could it be no one we've mentioned just far? Is there a quarterback who has had a substantial jump since, let's say, January?
Well, I mean, Bo Nix has caught up quite a bit compared to where Jaden Daniels was.
At one point.
His market has definitely caught a lot closer to it. At the end of last season, you could have bought them with about a 30 to 40% price difference, and now you're probably looking at about a 10 to 15% price difference. The guy that I think is really interesting because he's going to be treated like a rookie, and that's going to be J.J. McCarthy.
Yes.
And J.J. McCarthy's situation is so much better than most of these quarterbacks. Mm-hmm. They have an incredible offensive line. Not a good one, an incredible offensive line.
Maybe the best receiving core in the NFC.
And they have arguably a 3-headed monster at running back.
Yep.
Right? And they all block.
And a wizard calling the plays.
So when you look at this situation that they're in, you definitely are going to have an opportunity here. Not the same. The same opportunity could be looked at for Caleb Williams, but I don't think so. And the reason being is because Caleb Williams is still being talked about. Right? J.J. McCarthy,
even more than he was last year.
J.J. McCarthy, everybody wants to see what happens with him and what that is.
Yeah. It's a mystery.
And I'm going to tell you right now, if you are buying and then trying to sell in the first 4 weeks of the season for him, you are not doing it right.
Okay.
You need to be holding him till about 8 or 10 games into the season. What did we learn from Joe Burrow last year?
If you would have jumped the ship in September, you were hating yourself.
If you bought Burrow and then you sold Burrow in the first 4 months, then you completely got boat raced because the back half of the season, he blew up. Mm-hmm. McCarthy's going to get looked at like a rookie. So he's going to be in the comparison of the class that's there. Now I say to you, if J.J. McCarthy was in this year's draft class, where would he have gone?
Well, I'll put it this way.
I mean, look, Cam Ward is Cam Ward.
No, I'm with you. Think about it this way. There were a lot of people in the 2024 draft who thought McCarthy could be the third guy off the board, like even ahead of May. Right after Daniels and Williams. So I'm with you. If he was drafted this past April, he would have been the guy. Because all of us were talking about, is there a true bona fide QB1? Right? Again, Dart has a lot of the tools that carry over. Cam Ward, probably all in all, the best resume of anybody. But of course,
he's most ready right now.
Exactly, no doubt. And I think I'm very interested to see how he's going
to
look.
He is ready to take snaps at the NFL level today.
I think actually the only reason I'm hesitant on Cam Ward, just as a side note, is because I just do not trust the organization. I think what we see from him through the eye test is going to be very impressive, even if the stats are a little up and down, but that's kind of inevitable. But I'm with you. If J.J. McCarthy comes out this April, we are talking about him the past 4 months.
But his situation is very good. Now, you have about 2 weeks to buy J.J. McCarthy because you're not going to see much in the snaps, right? You're not going to see much of the snaps for him in the first preseason game, second preseason game. That third preseason game, though, if he looks like he can manage that offense, you're immediately going to get a 15% increase in what you buy.
And I love how specific you are because remember, for anyone watching, for anyone listening, it's that third preseason game where the quarterback always dresses. They may have watched him for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, but that is the ultimate litmus test. And Anthony Scott, who's a Chicago Bears fan, as we mentioned, he's a proud Chicago native, does so much great work there out on the ground. He's a Bears fan, and even he's going all in on JJ and Joe Burrow. Michael Lugo says 1,000% bias. He thinks JJ is a bust, but Michael Lugo in the comments tends to be biased, as you may have saw earlier. He doubled down, hell, he quadrupled down on the fact that Jordan Love is going to be on the bench by midseason. But anyway, long way to go in between now and then, but this is exactly what we want, because football is always king, even in the dog days of summer, and here we are midpoint, and it doesn't even feel like it, because we could have done this whole show just talking about card markets to gauge, things to evaluate, and much like Steve said, kind of the theme of the show, it's all circumstantial, just like baseball is doing at the middle of their season. But before we wrap it up, Steve, I know you have one more thing that you wanted to
Well,
address.
I definitely wanted to touch on this situation. So this was aired this last week. Mm-hmm. So a gentleman named Brett Lemieux had founded a company which was called Mr. Man Cave, and they were known for autograph memorabilia. And then he was involved with a bunch of groups in the past, and in fact, he was part of a group that was involved with what was called Operation Bullpen, which basically was a sting on a bunch of fake autographs. He took his own life this last week, but before he took his own life, he went to social media and put it out there, plain and simple. He stated that he had done over $350 million in fake and forged merchandise that is out in the marketplace currently, including autographs that were provided as sticker autographs for cards and stuff that are authenticated within the hobby space.
The controversy continues.
You are going to see this get dug into. It is kind of being brushed under the rug right now, and it's out there. But it's really being driven by like the internet detectives, right, that are driving it. Not necessarily the big focus, because the big guys don't want this cloud over the national of people questioning when we come to things like Kobe Bryant autos, Tom Brady. There's a bunch of different autographs that were specifically stated to have been, fakes. He called out names. He called out people. He did all of this stuff and then took the coward way out. And of course, he took his own life. But what I want to point out on this is that when it comes to autographs and it comes to merchandise and it comes to memorabilia, get things that you enjoy and things that you like. When it comes to the autographs within the sports world and the sports card world, these companies have to do a much better job than they have. Jimmy and I have sat here for the last 3 years and blasted these companies that will ship the cards out to the superstar player, the Giannis's of the world, and then Giannis is showing his collection in a removed tweet where he's got cards in his collection that are one of ones and products that's never been found. And you're going, these are disappearing and these things are happening. This just shines on top of this entire thing how rampant this really can be.
Right. And you and Jimmy are adamant about it. That's what's so cool about the show. It's kind of two-pronged. You get the day-by-day analysis of what's going on in the industry, but you also get some topical discussion of how the things in the industry are changing, things that both prove to be a hindrance and also things that prove to be a great help. And that's why having Anthony Scott join us, whether it be in studio or on the horn, or anyone else in the collective hobby space that could kind of shine light on those type of issues, is obviously fascinating for the audience, but it's even for me as a guy who hosts the show with you guys particularly fascinating, because again, on the day-to-day ebbs and flows, I'm following that the same way you and Jimmy and anyone else are, but those are those minute details that unless you're directly in this world, you can't really be privy to.
Well, and I want to read, this is just the first excerpt from what he posted, right? And he says, this is Brett Lemieux who posted this. He said, Mr. Man Cave has sold over 4 million items. Yes, millions. Surpassed 350 million in sales. Sold and produced holograms for Fanatics, TriStar, JSA, Radkey, TSA, Maze, Bonds, you name it, we made it. We sold over 5 million Fanatics holograms alone outside of what we produced in the biggest vendors of the industry. And I'm going to pause there for a second. What that means is that they produced fake holograms, then created their own autograph merchandise, applied these to them, and then sold them as authentics to Fanatics or whatever it is. Now, why would you say, well, yeah, those will get caught. They don't come up in the census. They do. No, these guys were so smart. They were reproducing holograms that actually existed. So when you would look the code up, guess what? It would verify authentic.
Right.
These were not. This was not done dumb. This was done very, very thought out, very smart. Whatever it is. They said they made JSA stickers and holograms. Steiner Sports. Wow. We made yellow card holograms and numbered sets in the millions. Panini. Oh yeah, almost forgot. We produced holograms and cards for their entire database. When Kobe died, we put out 80,000 items into the marketplace. Sold over 500,000 counterfeit Panini items.
Good Lord.
So guys, again, when you're getting into this and you're looking into this, and I know that our friend Steve Grad he's been all over the news on this. He's definitely out there. And the big news outlets are picking this up now. Because this is a really big scandal, right? This is a huge scandal. And he's really Steve's pointing out the fact that, like, hey, for years, he's called out a lot of these counterfeiters. He's called on this stuff. You know what? We have not done enough as a hobby to call out your government to go after these situations. As weird as that sounds, we need to go to our representations. Go to your senator and say, hey,
local officials.
You need to look into this. You need to find out, because this is ultimately affecting people's business, people's lives. And what I say is, the guy that goes and spends $1,000 on a Kobe auto to have it on, something trivial, right, and has a fake one, that may have been something that was like an investment for the future and now is no longer there. And I get, you got to pay attention to what you do. We want to trust a bunch of sources. The last time I saw this happen, it happened in the toy world, which was called Toy Tony's. Take a look it up if you get a chance. But this guy essentially was recarding vintage Star Wars figures and then grading them and getting these absurd high grades because he had fresh blisters, fresh card stock, and was cherry picking the best figures he could put in there. That stuff creates black eyes, and then it creates a sense of doubt, which will affect overall.
At large.
So this is going to be discussed, and it'll be kind of trickled around the national. But right now, they're trying to brush it under the rug.
Right.
And I actually think people need to be standing at the rooftop of the national, screaming and shouting, going to these places, demanding that they give the details of exactly how this stuff was autographed, how they obtained it, where they obtained it from.
The shady
this needs to be shared.
And I love it because, hey, shady tactics, underhanded taxes, they go down in every industry, as we know. This industry is no exception. So for all the positives you hear about it, it is very important to shine light and to really highlight, Steve, the negatives as well. You and Jimmy do such a good job of doing that, and that's what I love, because it essentially is a cautionary tale and very much serves as a warning for anyone out there who is a part of the audience, who is familiarizing themselves with this trade, with this racket, if you will, for the first time ever, or if they've already done it, in the past, but are still learning how to really do it on the day by day. That's so important to know. And I want to get to one more thing before we wrap up. Kind of seems like burying the lead here, and if it was a standard sports talk show, it would be. But again, focusing on the card aspect, we had a lot of things that I wanted to prioritize instead. But this morning, it did break. Chris Paul will be returning to the Clippers. Of course, he was there for years in their Lob City area with DeAndre Jordan, with Blake Griffin. Obviously, they were prominent contenders. They were in the mix every year. With Doc Rivers at the helm, we often wondered if they would get over the hump. In true Clippers fashion, they didn't. At this point, that's not even a jab, because all Clippers fans, if there are any at this point, would acknowledge that. But those were some of CP3's best years. And we're talking about one of the best point guards of all time, but someone who ultimately, when you look at the discussion around him and other people who played his position or just other contemporary greats, obviously there are things about his portfolio, if you will, that you can't necessarily stack up to other guys who have those key bullet points. But let's be real. Regardless of where Chris Paul is playing, that's the case. And I don't really think, in the grand scheme of things, this really means anything for the Clippers either. Do I want to see him play well? Do I want to see him in his career well? Absolutely. I think anybody who is at least somewhat of a fan of the association would say that. But I want to ask you this, Steve, and it kind of leads into a second question I have as we wrap things up here regarding, and it's a question I've asked before regarding Ovechkin and some other guys here in recent months. the hobby space surrounding legends and the market surrounding legendary players and who buys their cards, especially when they become relevant again. I don't know what this means for the Clippers, and I don't know what kind of year Chris Paul is going to have, but ultimately, do people see this break this morning and maybe not flock to go get a Chris Paul Clipper card, but is there any type of potential appeal here?
No, people think that they can use this moment to sell.
There you go.
Because they haven't been able to sell their Chris Paul.
Great
so
insight.
if anything, you might get a sale, and it might be 10% below the last one.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason being is because Chris Paul, his market is just done.
Yeah.
His market
It's
is where
sailed.
it's going to be. It's unfortunately, that's not it. There's guys that people are going to look at that are coming into this second and third year, or guys that changed addresses, right? Like when you start looking at situations, and I go, the Desmond Bain situation is a really good example. Desmond Bain is probably a really good pickup.
Yeah.
Because if he plays the way he's played, but in the shadow of Ja, and now he does that, changing teams, that's going to be a different situation, right? The Jalen Green situation, obviously, right? Like if he does what we anticipate that he's going to do, we're going to see an uptick in him. Right. But when you get these veteran guys that move, even when we were talking about Durant moving, Durant going to Houston, that's not enough to move the radar.
Yeah.
And Houston's probably got a little bit bigger fan base than the Clippers do.
No doubt.
Right?
No doubt.
So,
and that was a 7-team trade when it was all said and
so
done.
to me,
Yeah.
that's not necessarily it. Guys in this hobby space, and especially when it comes to basketball and baseball, football guys will take little gains across the board, right? And they're okay with it. Buy a card for 10, sell it for 15. Buy a card for 10, sell it for 12. Buy a card for 10, sell it for 13.
Yep.
They're okay with that. In the basketball world, they want to buy a card for 10 and sell it for 50. Right?
Bingo.
And it's just how it is. And the same thing in baseball. We want to buy the prospect low and we want to sell him high.
And that's what Michael Lugo says. That is mind-blowing, but it's important to note because those are the discrepancies, right?
It is. And it's so one of those things that it's going to be tough. Now, Michael Lugo, I want to answer your question. He said, how would someone know if they had one of those fakes? Right now, and this is why I'm saying we should be standing, and I wish I had it in me to just put this together and do it, but someone should be putting together a lynch mob to go to Panini,
Pitchforks and torches, baby.
and literally spend the entire convention at Panini's booth challenging them to let them know what autographs they obtained from Brett Lemieux and any of those named associates.
Magnifying glass.
They should be doing that. Because until we get that information out,
right.
Now, you know who's getting involved? The FBI.
The feds.
You know who's going to find out that
G-men.
information? The FBI.
Yeah.
And if this is heavily predominant in those premium years of Panini product, right? And you're talking, when they went to Prism and they started running the autographs and all of that stuff, and then they got into National Treasures and Exquisite and these very high-end flagship like items and products, if those autographs are included in those products, Panini is going to take an absolute bath. Like, who this could have been worse for, and I know that he called out Fanatics and he called out TriStar in this, but he called these out that they faked items that they had already done. He's saying they sold stuff to Panini in this, and that they created cards that ultimately went on to get graded and everything that were Panini cards so they were able to obtain stock.
Yeah.
There's a ton of problems here. That's where the issue is. You're going to have a hard time telling your Fanatics jersey unless Fanatics has a way where they've, specifically implemented it, which is funny because I've been behind a charge for 2 years of a concept that actually would help with this. And if these manufacturers would get in on it, it could change the game as far as that goes. But again, none of them were worried about it until it becomes a problem.
Always. And that's the case. That's it in a nutshell. You know me, I've had my background in sports gambling. Through all the controversies that has had over the years, it's never a controversy until it's an issue. When everyone is profiting, when everyone's happy, even if it may be, frowned upon from a moral standpoint, it doesn't matter because no one is ultimately being hurt. Once someone loses something, like what you said, once it becomes problematic, then it becomes a topical issue. And those topical issues we're going to continue to track here regarding the card market or the trading card industry and the various markets for the players. I mean, this is just so fascinating. As even Lugo said, it's amazing because whether you're a novice or whether you're just someone who's been deeply rooted in this for a long time, it's always constantly changing. So even if you are an expert regarding all this, you're very much learning on the fly. And what I love is that, we talked we opened with baseball, went into football. We just mentioned Chris Paul. We talked about, more the current stuff regarding the industry around it all, as you just did, Steve. And yet we didn't even once mention Scotty Scheffler dominating the Open Championship at Royal Portrush. You have UFC 318, the last fight of Dustin Poirier, Max Holloway, a trilogy fight. He finally gets his win over the Diamond. Outstanding fight. Max performs beautifully at 155 pounds. Dustin obviously doesn't get the result he wants, but he goes ceremoniously walking into the sunset, laying his gloves down the octagon as obviously a fan favorite, but one of the best fighters of his era as well, and a true all-time great. You have a beautiful romantic moment there. You have an awesome moment with Alexander Usyk, who I've mentioned briefly on the show in the past, recently as his victories with Tyson Fury. He knocks out Dubois in dramatic, dominant fashion, cementing himself as arguably the best heavyweight of the last 25, 30 years.
The most important thing that happened this entire last week
Let's hear it.
was the Phillies' recreation of the moment at the Coldplay concert.
Yes, and that is really, you want to talk about bearing the lead. And the reason why I mentioned that right there is because it says a lot that all these guys, much like a Chris Paul, are legends, but given the fact it's a more niche market, no one may be going to a store looking for a Scotty Scheffler or a Dustin Poirier or a Max Holloway or Alexander Usyk card because, again, what do those really mean? Do those really move the needle when you look at it in totality? No, just because those sports, tennis, where the Roland Garros a month ago with Jannik Sinner and Carlos Alcaraz, an incredible classic that went 6 hours. Alcaraz wins, Sinner comes back here at Wimbledon, and he gets one on him. We may be looking at the next great rivalry in this era of tennis. There are so many cool things going on in the sports world, yet if it doesn't really pop to the hobby space, it's not going to take precedent over these things that did. And Steve, as we wrap it up, what you just mentioned there may take precedent over anything in the world of entertainment. What started as just a fun little internet joke regarding the CEO on the Jumbotron at the Coldplay concert has now consumed all forms of media across the board. I guess that's a dumb question. We know what the moral of the story is, but how do you think this changes things? Because there's an ongoing discussion about, the kiss cam and various things like that. Do I want the people live in attendance to be able to see what I'm doing? Is that type of stuff an invasion of privacy? But no one has really cared because the consequence is not that dire. Well, now it is.
Well, I look at all of these, auditors that do, first amendment auditing and all this stuff and everything, and I watch those videos all the time. So honestly, look, you're in free play if you're out in public. That's pure and simple.
Fair
and that's
game.
it.
Fair game.
There are cameras everywhere. There are cameras capturing everywhere. There's cameras seeing everything. So do not think that you are, not out there. That guy, look, he was making missteps, and whether it was a misstep or that was purposeful, maybe he needed that. Maybe that was the change in his life that he needed, and he's going to move on with her and go do things.
Right.
But it did disrupt everything in his world because not only did his wife go out and start calling out a lot of stuff, she started calling out a lot of impurities in the business, and all of a sudden, all of that dirty laundry started to air.
Yeah.
Now he's stepped down. It's a whole mess.
I love how you briefly took, very briefly, a glass half full type of approach. He may learn from this, There's always a light at the end of the tunnel. There's always a silver lining, no matter what the situation is. But honestly, this time of year, when you have so many cool things on the sports front, on the social media front, let's be real, it's always volatile now more than ever. But when you could get those type of things where everyone could kind of collectively join in on the fun, maybe not fun for him, but it's definitely fun to join in at his expense. And next thing you know, you have major conversations. Michael Lugo, one last comment. If they don't react to saying a thing, but they just made it so obvious, that's really what it is. If you brush it off, no one's probably talking about it at all. And yet here we are on, days after, and we could probably flash forward a week, and we're still going to be seeing plenty of memes regarding it. But again, it's summer. There's a lot going on. Sometimes it's boring, sometimes exciting. Depending on who you talk to, you're going to have something. And one thing that is safe to say, as I'm getting messages in the group chat here that we have to get the hell out of here. Because you guys are getting ready to record Who the F is Frank as you do every Monday. It will drop on Tuesday. You guys were off last week. You're back at it this week. I know just based off of seeing some of the texts in this group chat, you guys should have an exciting show coming up here.
We've got big discussion about Bakersfield coming up. Should be fun.
Oh, my God.
But we all talk about San Diego
Riveting.
Comic-Con as well, and we do have some celebrity news of someone who passed. So you can check in on the show. It drops tomorrow on the One of Us Comics YouTube channel, of course, on all of the fronts here on Go Live Vegas, and of course on Spotify. So that again is Who the F is Frank, and make sure you check that out as well.
There you go. We'll have Jimmy back in action with us next week. Safe travels to him. Hope everything's going smooth, and of course hope business is smooth as well on the Game Day Sports Card front. That trickles over into the One of Us Comics as well. I mean, even Johnny Jimenez with the Toy Shack. It's all kind of the same family, the same network. We like to help each other out. And for all of those supporting us and helping us out by watching us, listening to us week in, week out here on Go Live Vegas, we thank you. We appreciate your support. Like, follow, subscribe to stay in the loop. Get in on those comments. You saw Michael, you saw Brennan, you saw Anthony, you saw Richard do. We want to get to the point where there's so many we can't remember all the names that are coming in. So definitely, again, phone lines will be open as we move forward. We want to make this as interactive as possible here on Go Live Vegas. So we thank you. We'll catch you next time when we do it all over again from the Go Live Vegas studio right here on the Game Day Huddle. Take care.